What up, Whisper Nation? It is now week 5 reaction. I can't believe it's happening so fast. We got Big Travy, Giant Game Time Hicks, and the woman behind the glass, Chelsea Lee Byers. We're talking week 5 reaction on episode 82 of the Fantasy Whispers.
Yes, we're back again.
Hey, let's pump up the volume.
Right here.
What's up, Whisper Nation? It's Monday, October 7th, and you're listening to episode 82 of the Fantasy Whispers with your hosts, Johnny Game Time Hicks, Big Travy, and me, Chelsea. If you want to follow the show, you can do so on Twitter at TF Whispers. You can also find us on YouTube and Instagram at The Fantasy Whispers. And you should visit the website, thefantasywhispers.com, where we've got articles, latest episodes, rankings, and new for 2019, we have our Patreon account. You can help support this show by joining as a patron of The Fantasy Whispers, where you'll gain access to a ton of bonus content. So head on over to patreon.com and search The Fantasy Whispers to find us today.
Woo! Well, thank
Week
you very
5.
much, Chelsea. Yes, week
Oh,
5 in the in the books. And I don't know if you could already tell by Johnny's tone, Whisper Nation, but Johnny is struggling a little bit, facing what looks to be imminent death.
Certain defeat.
In our league of record. Johnny, do you wanna have the mic for a second?
I don't even know what to even do anymore because it's like, it's not even like a lot of this time, Travis, we're getting to the point where, we're telling people the right things and all this. And it's just like this crazy stuff that happens. Like, literally, Amari Cooper is going against Jair Alexander, who's been one of the best corners in the entire league. Oh, doesn't matter. It's like he can't even guard anybody anymore. He's over there on skates. He's all out there on an ice rink. Jeez. Struggling. And then the defense, you talked about it. Philadelphia Eagles defense. You guys, couldn't mercy rule after what? I don't know. The 7th sack you guys record on a quarterback or like the 3rd fumble you get on him. Goodness gracious. You're up 24-0 with 2 minutes left. Unreal.
There it is, Whisper Nation. Johnny came in
I'm
hot.
right there with you, Whisper Nation. There is frustration if you can't tell.
Frustration in the nation.
Yeah.
Brought to you by Johnny. Johnny, that's all right though, man. Like you said, we've been giving the nation advice. We've been trying to help them out. Once again, it's not about us. Although we want it to be about us simultaneously. It's also always about the Whisper Nation. We feel confident you continue to like and subscribe over on YouTube and get all the content we've got for you over there. You're going to be very satisfied with what we've got to offer each and every week. Johnny, we've got a comment. Speaking of the nation, helping the nation out, we got a comment that we got off of YouTube that we wanted to kind of give some light to. So, Johnny, why don't you read that comment for us?
Yeah,
here?
Travis, this is pretty much the only thing that brightened up my day yesterday. So I want to thank you to Jared Robinson, who posted on our YouTube. He said, I've been following these dudes for almost a year now. I have nothing but good things to say. I bought the draft kit they created and was super pleased with the time, effort, and fantasy thought crammed into over 150 pages for just $10. Not only that, but I follow these guys on social media and reach out often for advice when I'm torn on a matchup to exploit, and these dudes are always quick to respond and give thoughtful advice. Y'all keep kicking ass. I'm going to keep listening. Well, we appreciate you. I'm going to keep losing. So I'm glad that we all have this figured out here.
Well, we may lose or win, but Whisper Nation, we want you to always win. We're trying to get you that fantasy football hardware. And part of that is the week 5 reaction show. Every week we're coming in with our reaction to all of the week's ups and downs and what to do, maybe looking forward with some of these guys, quick analysis on that. But before we jump into that, we've got our news and notes for today. So Chelsea, why don't you kick us off with some news from around the NFL?
For sure. And this segment comes to you by Fanatic. That's FANATIQ. That's where fantasy meets IQ. Fanatic has done some amazing work to their app this offseason, including adding articles, podcast episodes, player stats, and beat writer updates all within the app. So head on over to the App Store on your Apple device today and download that. Yeah, big week. We saw some crazy things. Let's start first with what happened in the Kansas City game. Patrick Mahomes came up limping. He was limping after a third down completion. So he's got an ankle issue. Is that a lingering thing?
Yeah, much like Johnny's fantasy football team, Mahomes is limping through this season.
Yeah.
He's done
Slowly breaking down.
That's an understatement there. I wish
did
I could nail it down to one ankle, man.
So Mahomes had this injury happen in the first week, was able to kind of get it taped up, play through it. And then a couple weeks went by. Obviously, we had week 5 last night. He gets rolled up on early in the game, starts limping. And then in the second half, his lineman then steps on his ankle again. And so he was even more immobile, if you will, after that. This is something to monitor because a lot of what comes, at least puts Mahomes to the next level as a fantasy quarterback, is his ability to get outside the pocket when plays break down. Yeah, and when they are extended, this creates the big play. Like that touchdown to Byron Pringle in the first half was a thing of
man, that was just
poetry.
glorious.
I mean, he rolled out 2 different ways out of the pocket to then roll to the right and throw a rope. And without that ankle, there's no way that play happens. So just something to monitor closely. Let's see how his rehabilitation process. Ankles are a tricky thing, but he should be able to suit up for next week.
And speaking of suiting up for next week, Tyreek Hill could be back on
Right.
that offense.
Yeah.
So after seeing Patrick Mahomes with an ankle this week that really affected him and no touchdowns the week before, it'll be really interesting to see how the Kansas City Chiefs can bounce back from one of their first losses of the season.
A lot of the Johnny talked about this on the live show and teams changing the way they're playing Pat Mahomes and they're playing man-to-man. Tyreek Hill comes back. You're not going to get away with that a lot often as you have been on some of these other wide receivers. So that could be just what the doctor ordered for Mahomes to get a guy like Tyreek Hill back.
Awesome. Wow. Well, Steelers are down another quarterback, it seems, in Mason Rudolph. And honestly, one of the most brutal and humbling off the field experiences. Didn't their cart break down also?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're like, hey,
Well,
we
that's
know
what-
that your
that's what
head
it was.
just got knocked off, but we're going to have to
Yeah.
walk you over here.
Yeah. Well, literally, like Hodges wasn't the backup to Mason Rudolph. He was the backup to the cart. So then the cart went down. They had to go to their 5th string quarterback in Hodges.
I mean, they're just like taking Mason Rudolph, dragging him off the
I
field.
felt like they had a lot more help
for the cart
than they did. Like they
the cart was getting lifted up by the 12-man team.
I actually heard one of the doctors say, "How's the cart?"
Yeah.
when Rudolph went down. So I just all jokes aside, that was a brutal looking
my
hit.
gosh.
I mean,
when you
he
watch it
fell
in
asleep on the
slow-mo-
way down.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was brutal.
When you watch it in slow mo, and then you could totally see his eyes in the camera as soon as his head hits the ground too. Oh,
Yeah.
that's really sad to see. Hopefully, they're
So
saying.
Johnny,
Go ahead.
thoughts on the offense with if Mason Rudolph has to miss? Hodges actually moved this offense.
Yeah, Hodges, to our surprise, he moved the offense. Now, again, we talked about this on yesterday's live. This Baltimore secondary is not the secondary you saw like week 1. So I do want to see a little bit more, but it is encouraging knowing that, hey, I mean, Juju had a good day. We talked about him yesterday on the live stream as well. So it is nice to see that even if they go deeper into this quarterback, backups that they have, that, they're still competent enough to get the ball out. And I think that Coach Mike Tomlin is a good enough to coach the game scheme around whatever quarterback he has. But good news is that Mason Rudolph is recovering back at home. He was released from the hospital last night from those concussion symptoms. He still has a concussion, but we'll see. He'll enter this league's concussion protocol, so be monitoring this for next week.
And around the league with another concussion, Wayne Gallman exited the day pretty early, especially if you were starting him over Saquon Barkley. That's a heartbreaker.
Yeah, it was not a great matchup either way, but you definitely wanted a player to be in the game. So Wayne Gallman was very disappointing here with the concussion. Maybe he recovers, but it's looking like Saquon could have a shot for this Thursday night game. So if you had Gallman and you didn't have Saquon, you're counting I mean, that the game last week was your win there, but if you have Saquon, you're stoked about the opportunity for him to suit up.
And I know last week we talked about him beating the timetable, and I guess that's what this looks like.
Yeah,
Jesus.
yeah.
And
Well, I think,
Shepard,
doing some of the research I've done, I just wonder if the injury was as serious as they let on from the beginning. Obviously he's special, but like high ankles are a thing. They're
Right.
so I wonder if they misdiagnosed. Pat Shermer was quoted saying like, these weren't our doctors that said 6 to 8 weeks. So
These are your doctors, America.
Whose doctors were they? So Saquon's got his own personal doctor, and it's himself.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and also
Same doctor that
we had
WebMD.
we had Sterling Shepard also go. There was a lot of concussions yesterday, including my team too. So
You got concussed from looking at your roster.
yeah.
Well, and the final injury report to note today is David Johnson battling a back injury.
Yeah, so Chase Edmonds will make the waiver wire article due
Friend
to
of
some
the
of this
show.
news. Yes,
Yeah, friend of the show, Chase Edmonds.
But David Johnson will definitely make that, or Chase Edmonds will make the waiver wire. And we've got to talk about this because backs they're a funky thing, man. They can flare up and they could, like he said, it locked up. I don't like that verbiage. And you think about the way that they've used David Johnson this year, just like on a crazy amount of snaps. So definitely you need to be monitoring this.
And Chase Edmonds looked good yesterday in the game. And I can tell you because I listened to a lot of AZ Sports Radio, they do really like Chase Edmonds. They think that he's a good, young, talented back. So, yeah, definitely look out for Big Travy's article on the waivers.
Well, and that's it for news and notes from around the league. From Fanatic.
All right, obviously brought to you by Fanatic. So get on over to your Apple app store there on any Apple device you have, whether your phone or your iPad. You're sitting at home, you want to get some stats. Check out Fanatic. Week 5, obviously it's time for our reaction to Week 5, and we usually start this off with kind of where we were right and wrong. So Chelsea, why don't you walk us through this path of joy and then pain?
Sure. Yeah, one of my favorites. We get to hold ourselves accountable to what we say.
Exactly.
Quarterback. We were right with Russell Wilson, which I love because I was playing him this week.
Yeah, Russell Wilson balled out, had a lot of his career best in stats as far as completion percentage, yardage, and things like that. And he was very emotional. Said he was tributing that game to Paul Allen, the late owner of the Seahawks. So that was a fun game to watch. It was a back and forth. And seems like those Rams Seahawks games are becoming that now in the Sean McVay, Russell Wilson era. It's kind of fun to watch.
Definitely. 2 running backs we were right about, Marlon Mack and Aaron Jones.
Yeah, so Marlon Mack, we talked about it yesterday on the live stream, as well as the one behind the glass hit me up before the games, and I said Marlon Mack, if he goes, you're starting him. If they want to be in this game, they're going to have to lean on the run game, and sure enough, that's what they end up doing. And Marlon Mack ended up having a good, solid day for the Indianapolis Colts. Love to see that.
And Aaron Jones with the historic 4-touchdown day.
Aaron Jones,
oh, man.
Jones, I think he joins 4 other guys in the history of the NFL that have gotten 4 touchdowns in a single game. It's incredible. We'll talk more about Aaron Jones in this show, but just love seeing this as a guy that we have been trying as an industry to get freed for the better part of 2 years, and we saw what he's capable of in a nutshell yesterday.
For sure. Wide receiver, we got Will Fuller and Calvin Ridley.
Will Fuller was an explosion waiting to happen, and talk about positive regression. It all came in one game.
Yeah.
It was fantastic to watch, just to see Deshaun Watson, because that was the other thing, was Deshaun Watson was under fire in this offense. They didn't know, people were trying to doubt if Deshaun Watson was going to hit that next level again, and he did it with a resounding yes. He had a perfect passer rating yesterday, and a lot of that had to do with his connection with Will Fuller. And then Calvin Ridley, Johnny, this was a question we got a lot over the last weekend coming into Sunday. Do we start Calvin Ridley? And Johnny and I were very firm that Ridley was in a blow-up spot. It took him a while. It was not till late in the game, but we loved seeing that.
Awesome. And at tight end, Eric Ebron.
Yeah, so we've been down on Eric Ebron pretty much a lot of this season, and he showed back up yesterday. We had him down. We had him ranked way deep on our tight end rankings, which if they're deep on a tight end ranking, that's never a good thing because even the middle class of the tight ends don't really score too much. And sure enough, Eric Ebron ended up with about one fantasy point, a little over one fantasy point. So hopefully you kept him out of your lineup and you didn't have to play him because it was not a good day for him.
Right. And I know Johnny's not going to like this one, but the Eagles defense.
Yeah,
John, I blame Travis for this one. He kind of like wished this into existence because he said he picked him up on 2 leagues, and and so I blame Travis.
I didn't think nearly 40 points from a defense was going to be possible, but I did think that the Jets were a choice matchup to target, and the Eagles came through 10 sacks. Johnny, that's rough.
Oh, that's not the only thing they got. That's probably the best thing that they got there.
Well, for our own sense of pride and sanity, I'm going to move through the wrongs really quickly. At quarterback, we were wrong about Lamar Jackson.
This one hurts. I have Lamar Jackson in our league of record. Big champion for Lamar Jackson. And he was showing some signs in the last 2 weeks that he salvaged with good performances. But he, again, was missing some throws here that were kind of wide open. And the Steelers have a talented defense. They have not always played up to that talent, but they are talented. And I think that they definitely had a plan for Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. They were able to stop the run and keep Mark Ingram limited. And that basically fed into the passing game in which Lamar could not get going. 3 interceptions. Hopefully he gets right, but yeah, definitely not.
These teams really know each other. They in the last 20, they have had 21 games decided by 3 or fewer points in their rivalry. So these teams know each other really, really well. I'm not extremely worried about Lamar Jackson.
Nice. And at running back, boy, are we sorry if we told you to sit Josh Jacobs.
All right. Everything pointed to sitting Josh Jacobs in this game. They were against Chicago. They are in London. Teams don't travel well over there. Well, apparently not. I guess the Bears defense decided not to travel over because Josh Jacobs had himself a day going over 100 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns, Travis. Man, this one does sting a little bit because everything was pointing towards do not play him.
And it's just a story of what Josh Jacobs is in this league. He is a starting running back for a Gruden-led offense. The volume is going to equal production. And yesterday it was just on the surplus end of that. And so it's hard for you to bench a guy that's going to get this kind of volume each and every week.
Wide receiver, Keenan Allen. You're wrong.
Yeah, Keenan Allen just not looking good yesterday. Well, I should say the Chargers. Yeah, Phillip Rivers, the Chargers. The Broncos, look, they were a desperate team. Whenever they come down to play the Chargers in L.A., it looks like a Denver Bronco game. Listen, pretty much anybody
sounds like a Denver Bronco game.
Yeah, I mean, for the Lindsey touchdown, he went to salute in the end zone, and it was a sea of orange. I just couldn't believe it. So, Allen will have better days. Obviously, he will continue to get fed in this offense.
Here's my question for you, Travis. I do want to bring this up really quick. So, Keenan Allen, now that Melvin Gordon is back, Austin Eckler, we had already talked about before when Melvin Gordon played with Keenan Allen, he saw 2 fewer targets per game. And then it's looking like they're using Eckler and Melvin Gordon on a lot of plays together. Are you really should Whisper Nation be concerned about Keenan Allen's production second half of the season?
I'm not ready to have after his one bad game just to sell Allen just yet. I think that he's definitely a guy that Phillip Rivers.
He's had back-to-back bad games. He had 5 for 48 last week against the Dolphins, and then this week he follows up with another stinker.
And I think Big Mike Williams' status is going to always depend on this. It shows me that the Chargers offense is something that's still sort of in flux. Keep an eye on it. Nothing's certain or shaken out for clear there.
That's a good point.
at the tight end position. We were wrong on this. I'm so glad I didn't scoop this guy up last week on the show like I was talking about.
Listen,
Tight ends, Tyler Eifert, Wolf.
Oh man, the Cardinals released DJ Swearinger, and a lot of people were questioning that move because then they had to start 2 rookies at that position, and it looked to paid off. And somewhat too, the Bengals didn't really target the tight end position all that much. I will say Tyler Eifert should have had a touchdown. However, he's got Andy Dalton back there, and he can't really throw. He placed this off target. If he would have placed it on target, Eifert could have caught that. But still, a really bad day for the tight end position right there for Tyler Eifert.
And wrapping up our rights and wrongs, we were wrong at the defensive position for the Saints. Saints D.
Yeah, Saints D started off giving up the touchdown to Godwin, and then they clamped down for the better part of that game. It looked like really getting to Jameis Winston, not allowing a lot of things there. And then they kind of gave up at the end there, another Godwin touchdown. And you saw this, that was more of a garbage time touchdown, but still Saints D was not a option you were satisfied with Sunday. All right, so I think that wraps up our right and wrong section, and it's time to jump into the meat and potatoes of the episode here, Week 5 recap. Johnny, we're starting off with a guy that basically has been the most sure thing in fantasy football this year, and that's Christian McCaffrey. Johnny, if you drafted Christian McCaffrey, did you draft yourself a ticket to the championship?
Listen, it's getting hard to think that you didn't. Yesterday, he had okay. First, let's talk about how Cam Newton isn't even in this offense yet. They're still scoring as if not better than when Cam was in there. He had 19 for 176 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. He followed that up with 6 receptions with 61 yards and a touchdown as well. He hasn't scored. He has only scored less than 23 fantasy points one time. Less than 23 That's like quarterback numbers right there, Travis. He gets Tampa Bay next week, which was the only team that did hold him to under 10 yards. He went 16 for 37 and 2 receptions for 16 yards when they played him earlier this season. But I think this will be a revenge game for CMC. Listen, I think that he has been exactly what we thought he was going to be and more. And he's not slowing down. I mean, good for this guy. He just finds a way to make it work.
Yeah, I think the difference for me that I see is he's actually doing it as a legit rusher this year. 5.6 yards per carry, leads the league in attempts with 105 and yards with 587. So it's not just the receptions that he's doing. And a lot of this has to do with the way that Carolina has had to maneuver their offense based on Cam's injury and to play to Kyle Allen's strengths, or if he has any. And that would be to rush the football first and then kind of play it into that. You did talk about Tampa Bay, which has kind of been a tough matchup for running backs, but then also San Francisco and Tennessee following. So all 3 of those teams within the top half against fantasy running backs. We'll see if that 23-point threshold for CMC holds up. But listen, you're not going to bench him, and I wouldn't even say you should temper expectations. You should just be counting your blessings that you took him above maybe a Saquon. Moving on, though, to a guy that has not had a lot of confidence going into games, but actually produced yesterday, Sony Michel, Johnny, finally gets positive game script to go his way. And Rex Burkhead obviously being out helped. But Sony Michel, how confident are you going forward with Sony?
I am still 1%, and that's just because I want to be generous here. If I could, I would be trying to sell Sony so hard this week and get him off of your team. Maybe if those people who just look at the stats, you can argue, it's getting turned around. Here's one thing that is kind of intriguing, Travis, when it comes to Sony. 16 for 91 and a touchdown on the ground, but he finally got some receiving work. He got 3 for 32. Now, I do agree with you in that I think the reason why he was able to do that was because Rex Burkhead was, in fact, ruled out. James White was in this game, but if I could, if I could sell Sony right now on this, uptick in performance, I would certainly try to do so. How about you?
Yeah, you probably need to sell him high here just because there are going to be other bodies in this backfield. But I will say it's very intriguing that he's behind only Zeke and Christian McCaffrey in red zone touches with 17. So this is part of what made Sony Michel so intriguing and got him. He's such an upside play every week is because he's in that Patriot offense that lives in the red zone, getting the bulk of not only the Patriots red zone touches, but the league's red zone touches. They get the Giants on Thursday, the Jets, the Browns, and then the Ravens are their next 4 games. Out of that, the Browns are the toughest matchup, but they don't really scare you either here. So I think you could actually wait a couple games and see if Sony can capitalize on some higher matchups or better matchups, and then you get some higher value by trading him away. So I'd say hold him just for maybe 1 or 2 more weeks. The Giants are definitely on Thursday night game. They're definitely going to want to run. I think that is one you could look to turn him right around. One of the guys we mentioned being correct on this week was Will Fuller. And Johnny, you wanted to talk a little bit on today's show about Will Fuller going forward and what Whisper Nation should do and where their trust level should be.
Right. So we got a lot of people who, had dropped Will Fuller, Big Travy and I. We were picking him up left and right in a lot of our leagues because people had dropped him. They didn't trust him. But listen, Will Fuller, we have to remember he tore his ACL not that long ago. He's coming right around the 1 year mark. He did it last October. It's starting to get near that 1 year mark. I think that he's starting to feel it again. Look, yesterday he had 14 for 217 yards and 3 touchdowns. He did have a fumble. But I'm not saying that that's what you're going to get moving forward. But we have to remember, like, when this guy is explosive, this happens a lot more often than it doesn't, where Will Fuller will catch these long bombs because he gets one-on-one coverage because they're bracketing DeAndre Hopkins on the other side. And Will Fuller is talented enough to beat that one-on-one coverage. I will also say Kenny Stills was out in this game, which definitely helped Will Fuller. So keep that monitored as well. And then you look at the next 4 matchups, Travis: Kansas City, Indianapolis, Oakland, and Jacksonville. Not really scared by any of those matchups there. So I like Will Fuller moving forward. At least with Kenny Stills out for sure. And then we'll see once Kenny Stills comes back what kind of target market share he gets.
Yeah, there's just so many good metrics when you look at Will Fuller based on his relationship with Deshaun Watson. I mean, and then one of the stickiest metrics we have in the business for wide receivers is air yards. And right now, Will Fuller is sitting at 4th in air yards, and he's averaging just under 8 targets per game. Then you look at the splits. I mean, in games with Watson and Fuller averages 19% of the market share. He averages 6 targets, 3 catches, 64 yards, and 0.75 touchdowns. If you project that on a whole season, he's got 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns in a full season with Deshaun Watson. He averages 12.8 half-point PPR points per game with Deshaun Watson. And Deshaun Watson, if he's looking at this and sees the games he had earlier this year, and then this game with Will Fuller, and he sees his production of a perfect passer rating, as I mentioned above, how can he not want to continue to feed Will Fuller in this offense? Obviously, this was a really good matchup. Obviously, Johnny talked about the matchups coming up, but I just love Will Fuller and the connection he has with Deshaun Watson. It's evident that this is special, and they continue to make big plays week in and week out when they're on the same page. I don't know how you couldn't trust Will Fuller with this kind of upside each and every week.
100%. And even, we talked about the draft kit earlier in the show on the review. In the draft kit, we talked about this very thing. Will Fuller and DeAndre Hopkins have finished as number 1 wide receivers 5 times, both of them in the same game 5 times in the last 2 years. And 2 of those 5 times, Will Fuller was actually the higher ranked wide receiver 1 in those instances. So they can both exist together. Will Fuller can be better than DeAndre Hopkins on certain weeks. He certainly was here yesterday, Travis.
Yeah, now going from 2 usable wide receivers to a team we thought had 2 usable wide receivers
Great
in the
transition.
Minnesota Vikings. The best in the business,
Yeah.
Johnny. No, just kidding. I mean, it's because you set it up for me.
That's
So
right. We
yeah.
work together. We're good partners.
we just botched it, so it doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Sorry about that, Whisper Nation.
Adam Thielen and the Minnesota Vikings, and then really Stephon Diggs is the story here too. Johnny, what do you make of this Minnesota passing attack, and in particular the wide receivers?
Listen, Lizzo should have changed her song to Adam Thielen and the Minnesota Vikings, because that's essentially all this is. Every single time.
Maybe that's who it was. New
Maybe-
boyfriend.
Hey, it could have been. We won't tell.
I think he's married, actually.
Or yeah, never know.
He was.
Oh yeah, it was. But Adam Thielen again, 7 for 130 and 2 touchdowns. Travis. It looks like whenever Kirk Cousins is dropping back, listen, there was all this talk, all this, chatter, whisper in the bushes that Stephon Diggs was going to get traded. He asked for a trade, all this stuff. And then it came to the point where it's like, oh, well, squeaky wheel is going to get the grease, right? Well, no, it wasn't. It was the same old story. And, it was Kirk Cousins go to Adam Thielen. And listen, you got the next 4 games against Philadelphia, against Detroit, Washington, and Kansas City. None of those teams scare you whatsoever. Adam Thielen is a locked and loaded wide receiver for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, Thielen's the only one I do want to trust. I think Diggs is the one you definitely are very panicked about. You may want to hold on to Diggs just because he could get traded. I don't know if that's going to happen, but you may want to hold on because right now you'd undercut any value you could get for him. But he's only cleared 4 receptions and 50 targets one time. Cousins is averaging 25 attempts per game. If you took that out and you put it into last year, 25 attempts per game would have ranked 22nd in the NFL. I don't buy that the Vikings want to appease both Diggs and Thielen. I think it's very important to them to run the football and then get Thielen involved, because Thielen was actually the squeakier wheel in this instance, because last week he came out and chirped up, didn't miss practice, but definitely chirped up. And then Kirk Cousins came out and publicly apologized to Adam Thielen, and then publicly apologized again by getting him fed in this game. So I think that is the case here.
He did that on another podcast, which wasn't our podcast, so it was an issue. That's why more people didn't hear about it.
Yeah, he's got to get over here. So that's definitely the situation here. Adam Thielen is the one there, the clear one, and I think the only guy you can trust in the passing attack, and that includes Kirk Cousins in any kind of streamable situation as well. All right, moving on to a guy that's earned the trust of his team, and I hope his coach at this point, and that's Aaron Jones. Johnny, what a day for Aaron Jones. 4 touchdowns in a single football game. Johnny, talk to the nation about our guy Aaron Jones.
Yeah, Aaron Jones is finally, it's looking like he's being freed up a little bit. Now, Jamal Williams wasn't in this game, but Carson, not Chris Carson, another Carson, came in, and he had a good day too. Listen, if you're going to carve up this Cowboys defense, it's going to be by running the ball. And Aaron Jones was more than capable and more than ready to do so. He looked great. 19 for 107 and 4, as Travis talked to. He also added 7 receptions for 75 yards. We talked about this where Aaron Rodgers, when Devontae Adams went down, was targeting his running backs and tight ends a lot more. And, you look at what Aaron Jones has done this season, only has scored less than 10 fantasy points once this year, and it was against Chicago Bears defense. So I love Aaron Jones the rest of the season. I think he's an RB1, and I think he was an extreme value where you got him in drafts.
Yeah, we were talking about red zone touches for Sony Michel. Talk about a guy that's producing way better than Sony Michel and only has 1 less red zone touch. That's Aaron Jones. 16 red zone touches through 5 games for Aaron Jones. He has scored in 4 straight games now, Johnny. And over his last 4, if you take out that bad Chicago opening night for both teams, he has just under 5 catches per game on his average and just under 40 yards receiving per game. So adding to that total, we knew he was a good runner. We knew he was electric, but now he is a staple in the passing game as well. And as you know, Devontae Adams was injured, but then the Packers were able to lean on Aaron Jones, and they realized that Aaron Jones is the way that this offense opens up everything for everybody else. If you stayed patient with Aaron Jones after the first couple of weeks, you're very excited about what you have in him now. Speaking of excitement, Chris Godwin has his fantasy owners excited because he has definitely continued to just stomp on our preseason projection for him and continue to be one of the MVPs of this young fantasy football season. Johnny, Chris Godwin, has he taken over here in this Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense?
I think he has. I mean, Mike Evans put up a zero burger. Yes, I understand. We talked about he was matched up against Marcus Lattimore, who's a really good corner. But Chris Godwin continues to produce 7 for 125 and 2. He was against Eli Apple. He's wide receiver 3 on the season. He's only scored less than 11 fantasy points once. And, he's seeing at least minimum 5 targets every single game, Travis. So has a really nice floor baked in there. Again, this is a Bruce Arians-led offense. So you always, like that they're going to be moving the ball. They're always going to be putting it in the air. And I think that Chris Godwin, if you drafted him or if you can possibly trade for him, I would. It's going to be expensive, but I think he's going to be pretty safe for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I don't know if you're going to be able to trade for him without giving up too much of your team. But yeah, Johnny, that window may have closed.
Yeah.
But what we're seeing now is Mike Evans slowly losing his target market share to Chris Godwin after 5 weeks. We have Mike Evans at 26% and Chris Godwin at 25%. So Godwin continues to be the guy that they trust. Listen, you're not going to get a deep shot every single time with Mike Evans. So Mike Evans may have just become a more boom or bust reliable or not as reliable wide receiver in this offense, where Godwin is the guy soaking up all the targets underneath and doing the work in this offense. Look, Jameis Winston used to love Adam Humphries. Imagine having an Adam Humphries on steroids, and that's Chris Godwin. Godwin is essentially a way better Adam Humphries. And so I think that what we're seeing is Winston taking more of what the defense gives him, and that plays well into what Godwin can do each and every week. And he's scoring touchdowns. So you just add on top of that. Well, that wraps up most of our storylines for today. Obviously, we like to end the show with some honorable mentions. Chelsea, we obviously can't spend, forever talking about all the performances, and there were monster performances left and right yesterday. So why don't you walk us through some of the honorable mentions here?
Sure. We've got Leonard Fournette that had a beastly Devonta Freeman and Chris Carson. And I'll pause there for commentary.
Yeah, so Chris Carson continues to be the guy that the Seahawks trust and love, Johnny. And no matter what Penny does, if he comes in healthy or whatever, Chris Carson continues to get fed, and they don't really care what anybody else thinks. They're going to continue to pound. And how can you not? I mean, Chris Carson just looks great.
Yeah, he looks like an absolute stud out there. So, yeah, all of the questioning on, where they were going to go. Is Rashad Penny going to take over this backfield? I think over the last 2 weeks, we have seen that is not going to be the case, that they are going to go with Chris Carson.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about Leonard Fournette. We have him here. We got a lot of questions over the weekend about trading Leonard Fournette. I'm not going to say it again. Do not trade Leonard Fournette away. Like, this guy is getting more or just as much volume as a guy like Christian McCaffrey. The difference is he's not on as good of an offense, although Minshew continues to be moving this team down the field. So do not trade Leonard Fournette away. Keep that volume. It's king in fantasy football,
especially at the running back position.
Yes.
Some more honorable mentions. Tyler Boyd.
Yeah, Boyd rebounded well. That was good to see.
Amari Cooper, we already mentioned, but it's worth mentioning again. Just to
Johnny.
Get that head shake out of Johnny.
Johnny, Amari Cooper. You know anything about Amari Cooper this week?
I digress.
Matt Ryan.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah,
Matt Ryan.
Finally doing something with this Atlanta offense. We'll see if it can continue or if it was just the matchup and well, listen, that defense is really bad, as we saw yesterday. So Matt Ryan is going to need to do more of this stuff if he's going to keep Atlanta in any game.
Yeah, he's about to crush some rush or some passing attempt records and yardage if he continues this pace.
And
it was interesting.
Oh, go ahead, Chelsea.
I was just gonna say it was interesting because Matt Ryan's performance yesterday didn't really come in the hands of Jones either. So
Right,
just imagine
right.
what it's like if he gets actually involved in the offense.
And
Yeah.
then they get Arizona Cardinals next week. So yeah.
DJ Chark had a huge week this week.
DJ Chark continues to be a set it and forget it option. I did not want to believe this 2 weeks ago. I didn't want to believe it this week because I wrote him as a stay away in my article. And look, if it, in the famous words of Johnny, if it walks like a duck and acts like a duck, it must be a duck. And DJ Chark is catching a bunch of ducks from Minshew and scoring touchdowns with him. So
Yeah.
Excellent. Speaking of ducks, I guess Michael Thomas is also a duck.
Nah.
Michael Thomas, monster day. Teddy Bridgewater
Yeah.
looking like Drew Brees back there. 11 for 182 and
Hey.
2.
Teddy saw the video of Drew Brees on Instagram throwing footballs, and he said, "Uh-oh, I got to get going here,"
Yeah.
because he was throwing dimes out there, and Michael Thomas was catching 11 of them for 182 and 2 touchdowns. That's insane.
Dalvin Cook also had a monster performance. He had a fumble, but didn't slow him down much.
Yeah, 21 carries, continues to get the volume. The Vikings got exactly what they wanted to do done. They got to feed Thielen, and they got to feed Dalvin Cook. Those are your 2 guys in this offense going forward, and you don't need to think much about it. And how about that work in the receiving game? 6 receptions for 86 yards. You got to love what Dalvin Cook's doing there.
All right. Our letdowns. Ooh, there's some bad ones.
I don't know if we should maybe have a watch on Johnny for this one.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah, about
Letdowns.
a lot of my
Well-
players on here.
Letdowns. Johnny's whole team and
There we go.
and Mike Evans.
Yeah, can we get an APB on Mike Evans?
Right.
0 yards and catches on 3 targets. If you drafted Mike Evans high in your drafts, you've got to be banging your head up against the wall at this point.
No doubt. Green Bay Packers wide receivers, all of them.
Yeah, this was a game you really liked Green Bay, but Green Bay did exactly what they were supposed to do. Like Johnny said, if you wanted to attack Dallas, it was definitely against the run. They have a really good pass rush and a decent secondary, and the Packers just kind of avoided going after that. They didn't need to. They got up early in this game. They continued to run the football, and like we said, Aaron Jones with 4 touchdowns. So game script was a big part of this, I think, too. And I just don't – we have a different Packers team here. It is not the same set it and forget it on Aaron Rodgers because he's slinging the ball around a bunch of times. They have a defense. They have a run game. You're going to have to pick your spots with Aaron Rodgers and these Packers wide receivers.
Mm-hmm.
LaShawn McCoy, let down.
Yeah, it looks like Damian Williams came back into a nice role for this offense. Obviously, the game script, there were points in this game that were just weird where Kansas City felt like they should have been running and they weren't with Damian Williams and LaShawn McCoy. LaShawn McCoy had that fumble where, actually he wasn't holding the ball out like he normally did.
It was like a nice punch out.
Yeah. So, look, I think LaShawn McCoy will have opportunities. This was a perfect matchup for him. They were favored by 10-plus points here. Indy had been struggling against running backs. It was kind of inexplicable the way it was kind of – we've talked about this before, Andy Reid's propensity to forget the running back once in a while. It looks like he kind of did that here and wanted to just continue to throw, and it just wasn't available for the Chiefs.
Darren Waller, not much of a baller this week.
This was a sad thing here. 4 for 39. We thought that he would definitely get more targets, especially with Tyrell Williams out, but that was not the case. And what's a little bit more shocking, too, is that the Raiders actually won this game, Travis, and they did it without Tyrell Williams or Waller the Baller putting up major stats. A little interesting, but I do think this is a down week. I do think that this is a great opportunity to go out and try to buy Waller if you can.
Yeah, we talked about it already, but the Bears defense was a letdown. It's getting shredded.
Oh, yeah, that was crazy. I couldn't believe it. The revenge game for Khalil Mack was actually a revenge game for John Gruden.
Yeah.
Who was taking shots at the Bears club dub with his own dancing in the locker room.
Wasn't he dancing on the sidelines too?
Oh, he just
Love
dude,
it.
that guy's the greatest.
Yeah.
Robert Woods.
Knock on wood if you're with me.
Yeah, well, the knock on Woods is he's not with you. And,
Yeah.
and your fantasy football team.
No.
Look, the Rams. Shout out to the Ball Blast podcast. Kate over there with a great tweet said, "Who broke the Los Angeles Rams?" She said that last year, and I commented from the Fantasy Whispers. I said Bill Belichick, and what we've seen is that Belichick took the Rams to school on their offense, and Sean McVay has not turned around and counterpunched the NFL or Bill Belichick. He's just failed to get this kind of offense going, and a lot of it's the interior line. So more to come there on the. But Woods doesn't seem to be the same consistent wide receiver he was last year.
Now, I'm not surprised to see this name on our list, Melvin Gordon.
Yeah.
Although it does feel too early to call him a letdown.
Letdown in this week for sure. I think that we're eventually going. Listen, I saw multiple times where Philip Rivers was not satisfied with Austin Eckler in pass blocking. Austin Eckler also had a goal line fumble out of the end zone. So we need to be conscious of how the Chargers are probably going to ease Melvin Gordon back into this thing. And we talked about how that, what that means for another letdown here in Keenan Allen with 4 receptions and 18 yards. I think better days are ahead for both of those guys in this offense. And like Chelsea said, this offense is still in a little bit of flux.
Sure. And last but not least, Greg Olsen.
Yeah, Greg Olsen joining that
Zero
elite
burger,
club
dude.
of Mike Evans with the zeros.
Brutal.
Everybody, there is no more devastating feeling than starting a player that gets 0 points.
Oh,
And played the whole game.
right.
Yeah.
And not
Like, it's
only-
not like they
and-
left with an
and the
injury.
team-
There's
and the
one
team puts
worse
up
fe-
34. And the team puts up
Yeah.
34 points.
Yeah. There's one worse feeling. When you start a guy, he gets hurt on that first play and he had negative yardage or
Oh, yeah.
or he had a fumble. That
That's
one
it.
is worse, but
That's
that's it. And there's few. So
We'll put our definitive list of what was the worst scenario
yeah.
shortly,
together.
because I think Johnny's probably encountered this
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
All right, that wraps up letdowns and honorable mentions.
Yeah, and then our last segment, of course, every week is the keep trade cut segment. So Chelsea will give us a few names, and we'll do a keep trade cut.
Rapid fire, DeAndre Hopkins, keep trade cut.
Hey, the
I'm gonna
window
keep
the window
DeAndre.
is still open. You should try to go get him.
Yeah, I would buy low as fast as possible on DeAndre Hopkins. Still with 39 targets on the year, that's 29%. Even after Fuller's monster game, 29% of this team's market share for targets. Go get Hopkins as soon as possible.
David Montgomery, keep trade cut.
And keep him Montgomery too. I think the volume is there. He did get the goal line plunge there. I think in a day where the Bears were not very inspiring, he was the one bright spot. So I'm keeping Montgomery.
I'm with you on that one.
What about Calvin Ridley?
So
Johnny,
this
why
was
don't you-
interesting. I would try to actually possibly trade him if I could, simply because it's looking like Mohamed Sanu is going to be the wide receiver 2 over there. I mean, Ridley, it's going to be back and forth between Sanu and Ridley on a weekly basis. So if I can try to sell high on Ridley during his up week, I think I would try to do so. Package him and get a better wide receiver, a more consistent wide receiver.
Nice. Austin Eckler.
Yeah, I would try to trade Austin Eckler as well. I think that if you could get him maybe even over to the Melvin Gordon as some insurance here, you should try and get some value out of Eckler. I did not like what I saw. I alluded to that a little bit. And I just think Eckler's numbers will take a massive hit. He will have some flex value week to week, though.
Speaking of massive hit,
Ooh.
keep trade cut Mike Evans this week.
This one's really tough, Travis. I think I'm going. I mean, you can't obviously trade him after a 0 burger, but if I think on the next explosion, hopefully it happens in the next couple of weeks. Mike Evans goes off, and then I think I'm going to try to trade him. We talked about it. His market share continues to drop to Chris Godwin. He's looking like he's going to be the deep threat, which will be the boom or bust. And I just don't think that Jameis Winston is consistent enough to produce 2 top wide receivers for this offense like we thought he could. I'm probably going to wait for that and then try to trade.
Right on. What about Julio Jones?
Well, I would say trade, but last year I traded him around this time, and then he flipping popped off and scored 8 touchdowns for the rest of the season. So I don't really know. I would say keep Julio Jones. He still dominates the target market share here. He only has, he has a couple bad games, but I think that the Falcons are going to continue to throw, like Johnny said, because that defense is so bad, and you want the guy getting the most targets. That should even out mathematically.
That's right. Josh Gordon, keep trade cut.
So I don't feel comfortable saying cut Josh Gordon, but I'm going to say bench Josh Gordon because similar to what's going on with the Rams, I see a lot of the interior line issues of the Patriots lately, which is kind of weird. They don't typically have line issues, but it's showing even against the Redskins, which is kind of weird. I think Josh Gordon, and it's showing in Josh Gordon's play because he's not able to get down the field on these deep routes as much as he normally is.
And last but not least, Stephon Diggs. I think he wants to be traded, right?
Yeah, right.
I would hold Diggs.
You're gonna hold?
Just for the trade upside. I think if he could get traded to the right team.
For me, I would be trading him, and I would use the whole trade excuse as the upsale.
I like that
because listen, what we've seen in history is that most often when these wide receivers change teams mid-season, as much hype and as much excitement that we do get for that player, it rarely works out where they're actually better than they were off before, and their old teams learning new systems, getting acclimated with the quarterbacks and things like that. Stats have showed that it usually takes until the second year before that wide receiver or player can get true, unless they're a running back. The wide receiver position takes a little bit longer to get integrated. So I would use it right now as a key to try to sell Stephon Diggs and get a better wide receiver.
Yeah, I think that's a great take on that. Well, that wraps up our show for us, guys. We did everything for the week 5 that we thought. If you guys want to hear about anything else that happened, or if you guys want some of this waiver advice we've got, reach out to us. Hit thefantasywhispers.com. We'll have the waiver article coming out for you there. We've got all of our episodes posted right there on the site. As always, for Johnny Game Time Hicks, I'm Big Travy. That's Chelsea Lee Byers, the woman behind the glass. And Chelsea Lee Byers just had a birthday. So happy birthday, Chelsea.
Happy birthday.
So Whisper Nation, wish Chelsea a happy birthday, would you?
Thanks.
And other than that, we're signing off. We're the Fantasy Whisperers, and we're out. Peace.
George Kittle, I need a huge night from you tonight.
Have fun tonight.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Whisperers podcast. You can hear more from John and Travis on Google Play, SoundCloud, and iTunes. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at TF Whisperers.